What up, YouTube? My name is Batman, and first off, let me say that I guarantee you that Cortana is coming back in Halo 5, okay? So, the idea is she went rampant and multiplied herself to death inside a Forerunner construct, right? I promise you there's some wacky Forerunner internet technology and Cortana is still kicking it somewhere in the Forerunner database thingy-McJigger. And she'll come back stronger than ever, probably like some Forerunner goddess, maybe she'll even get her own body, and then she and the Master Chief can fuck like wildebeests. You know, keep in mind, this is the game that brought Sergeant Johnson back to life in Halo 2, when in the last image of him on Halo 1, he had 3 flood infection forms sucking on his face in a tomb underground on a planet that would later be annihilated in a massive nuclear explosion. And they brought his ass back. So, stop crying. I know it sucked when she died. I cried too, but she will return. Now, moving on. I do have a very strong opinion about what I suspect Halo 5 multiplayer will look like and the direction of the Halo franchise as a whole. And at this point, I'm really considering not purchasing the next Halo, which is big for me. You know, for the last decade, I've extensively played every game except for Halo Wars. And I've read every single book up until the Forerunner saga. I think this new author was no Eric Nyland. I didn't really like his writing. But after all this time, I've invested, you know, countless hours and a whole bunch of money into the Halo universe, and so it's kind of awkward to imagine abandoning it, but it might have to come to that because Halo is becoming another glaring example of what I consider the only problem with capitalism, which is that sometimes the product that makes the most money isn't necessarily the best product. Now, the first thing everybody needs to understand about Halo 5 multiplayer is that Halo 5 multiplayer in its entirety is changing dramatically. Alright? The traditional Halo experience that a lot of us veterans grew up with is gone and it's not coming back. Halo 4 was 343's way of delicately declaring that they are pursuing a new, younger audience with a new style of game. And the changes they've made so far, and the changes I expect they will continue to make in Halo 5, are dramatic, but subtle. Subtle enough so that we don't notice them right away. Now, you'll notice this is Reach gameplay, and that's because I don't have Halo 4 anymore. I gave it to my little brother, which is what I do with games when I'm done playing them. And it's not that I thought Halo 4 was a bad game, it was a strong title, and relative to all other FPS multiplayer games out there, it was pretty good. But my main complaint, and this is a complaint you'll hear from a lot of Halo veterans, not all of them, but a lot, is that it just doesn't feel like Halo anymore. It's not that traditional Halo experience. But when you ask them specifically what it is that's different, they'll struggle to put their finger on what it is exactly. However, newer fans of the series seem to love the game, and why shouldn't they? It is a good game, so there's a disconnect, and I think I have a full understanding of what this disconnect is, and more importantly, why it is that way and why it will continue this way in Halo 5 and beyond. And so I thought I would lay it out for you guys, and you can judge for yourselves. The bulk of Halo's traditional audience has grown up. The series is over a decade old, and so anyone who was a teenager when they first started playing Halo is now an adult. Halo 3 was 6 years ago this month, so if you were 12 years old when Halo 3 came out, you are now legally an adult. It's not as easy to sell games to adults. The Halo veterans now have jobs and college and various other responsibilities and probably not a lot of time or money to spare for video games. And if they do, it's probably enough for only one game, and there's a good chance that game will be Call of Duty or Battlefield because that's what all their friends are playing. With Halo 4, 343 Studios is going after a new generation of gamers who are still young, who have a lot of free time on their hands, and whose parents still hook it up fat for birthdays and Christmas. And frankly, I don't hold that against them. You know, I'm not upset, no hard feelings, business is business. Their job is to make a profit, that's what they're trying to do, and best of luck to them. I'm just not sure their product is for me anymore. The generation they are after now is new to the franchise. They were in kindergarten and diapers when Halo 1 came out. My little brother, he's a big Halo 4 fan. He's an 11-year-old 6th grader, and he was 3 years old when Halo 2 was popular, and 5 years old when Halo 3 was popular. For the new generation of Halo players, Halo 4 is the beginning, and 343 is hoping to hook this generation right now on Halo 4 so that they can sell them games until they are in college too. Now, pay attention because this is what it all comes down to, okay? To hook a new generation of players, those players need to have a really good time on Halo 4 and Halo 5 right now. And the only way 343 can accomplish that is by making significant changes to the game that drastically reduce the skill gap, because Halo has always had a very wide skill gap. An experienced player would always have huge advantages over an inexperienced player. The experienced player knows where the power weapons spawn, knows how to actually use those power weapons, knows all the nade spots, and of course has way better aim. And each of these things has been tweaked in a way that empowers noobs. And my thesis is that tweaking is only going to become more pronounced in future Halos. Oh, and before I really get into it, if you're wondering why the fan favorite playlists Team Snipers and Team Doubles didn't return in Halo 4, it's because they aren't noob friendly. Team snipers is basically unplayable if you're not good at sniping, and team doubles was always about a more competitive experience for stronger players. And that's a slap in the face to us veterans who enjoyed those playlists. I was a big Team Snipers fan, but we're getting slapped in the face on purpose because 343 doesn't want us around anymore, because advanced veteran players are the main obstacle standing in the way of making newer players feel like badass motherfuckers. Now, for starters, let's talk about power weapons. Power weapons have always been very unfriendly for newer players. For one, because they don't know the spawns, but also because the power weapons are only powerful when used correctly, and using them correctly took a decent amount of skill acquired through practice. For instance, in previous Halos, the shotgun and the sword have always been extremely deadly and infuriating to be on the receiving end of their kills. But you had to be able to control the engagements with enemies so that you fought them at basically point blank, and generally with a bit of surprise on your side, because if you just tried to bum rush them, even at really close ranges, they could just back up while shooting you and get the kill. And what that meant is that an experienced player with a sword who uses radar and crouched around and timed the kills would make newer players feel like there was nothing they could do to stop him. But then, when that newer player picked up the sword or shoddy, looking for that same power, but not having practice in the art, they would die bum rushing some kids. So veteran players could use the power weapons against newer players, and newer players had to wait till they themselves were veterans. So, to remedy this problem, 343 didn't nerf or buff the power weapons that much. What they did was much more clever and subtle. They made the lines of sight on the map so long that the power weapons are really useless in anyone's hands now. Think of a drift, right? It's the close quarters map on Halo 4, it's the smallest map on Halo 4, and even on a drift, the sword is mostly useless because the lines of sight are so long. Obviously, you can't use it in the middle of the map where you can get shot from up above and across the room. You can't take it outside where everything's wide open, which leaves only those narrow hallways, and granted, they are narrow, but they are also incredibly long. If you try and rush someone, they can back up and shoot and get the kill. So you can't rush with it because 90% of the lines of sight are too long. So the only other option is to try and use stealth and crouch around corners, but that won't work either because they'll just see you with Promethean vision. So the close quarters power weapons are completely useless on the smallest map in Halo 4, which means they are mostly useless on all the other maps also, which means newer players don't have to worry about getting beat up on by swords and shotguns anymore. And the other difference, obviously, is that they now have icons on the screen in the minimap showing you exactly where the power weapons are. And it's not that controversial. I don't really mind it. It's something I had actually wanted from previous Halos, but it is clearly a gift to newer players, right? You don't have to learn the power weapon spawns anymore, which has always been a huge part of Halo multiplayer. And again, I'm not super pissed about that. It just fits into my narrative of enabling noobs. Now, along with a nerf on power weapons, you have a nerf on vehicles, which are basically just power weapons with wheels, right? Excluding the Goshawk, I can say adamantly that vehicles in Reach were balanced. They were nerfed because it took teamwork and some critical thinking to take a vehicle out, and those two things are hard for newer players to come by. Now, in the gameplay you're watching, I'm shitting on people with vehicles, but I wouldn't say that's because the vehicles are OP. It's because I've put a lot of practice into using them, and this is the exact same problem that power weapons had. In the right hands, the tank is extremely deadly, but in the wrong hands, it's not very good at all. For instance, when I'm in the Scorpion tank, I have to make sure, first of all, that I don't get boarded by enemies that can fly, sprint, go invisible, or go invincible. I have to make sure those enemies don't get close enough to throw a plasma grenade on the cockpit, because that'll take me out in one hit, and leave the tank for the enemy to take for themselves. I have to dodge rockets and that blue heat-seeking sticky gun, you know what I'm talking about. And of course I have to watch out for snipers, because a sniper from 10 miles away can kill a tank with one clip if it shoots it in the wheels. Not to mention, the enemy team gets their own tank to fight with as well. So, when I get in a tank, yeah, I can destroy kids and piss people off because I've practiced a lot with it. I know what dangers to look out for. I know to use it very defensively. But newer players maybe see me drop a running riot with it, and they give the tank itself full credit for that. They get all excited about their turn with the motherfucker, but then they'll bum rush into the enemy spawn, get boarded pretty quickly, and die. So advanced players could have a great time with vehicles at the expense of newer players' fun, but the newer players would not have that same opportunity themselves until they were also advanced players, just like with power weapons. The problem is, most players won't be bothered to put in the time to get good at the game. They'll just return the game to the store and go back to Call of Duty. So the main nerf for vehicles obviously is that everyone gets to spawn with plasma pistols and plasma grenades, which by itself makes vehicles useless because in order to do anything useful with them, like push a spawn or protect an objective, you're going to have to be close enough to the enemies that they can just spam plasma bolts and grenades at you. And on top of that, they've heavily nerfed the vehicles themselves. Things like Warthog health, the aiming on the tank or the Goshawk, the Banshee's air maneuvers, etc., etc. So power weapons and vehicles are mostly useless in Halo. Who would have thought that day would ever come? Now, aiming. This is where shit gets real. This is the one thing that actually pissed me off because I think it is very sneaky and kind of unfair. Aiming has always been really important in Halo. It was the primary measurement of skill gap. You know, in other games like Call of Duty or Battlefield, you have to land 3 bullets and basically every weapon is going to shoot more than 3 bullets a second, which means you have to stay on target for a whopping 1 second, and since you generally have 30 bullets in the clip, there's a lot of room for error. This is not the case in Halo. You can't spray and pray in Halo. To take down an opponent's shield, you got to stay on target for at least 3 seconds, and if you miss just one of those shots and your opponent doesn't, you've already lost the gunfight. So the experienced player is always going to outplay the inexperienced player because statistically speaking, the inexperienced player is way more likely to miss a shot, and in theory, until your aim is as good as the aim of the experienced player you're fighting, you will not be able to beat him in a standard gunfight, and that's just a textbook skill gap. And of course, after you drop the shields, you have to get the headshot, right? The victor in the majority of Halo gunfights is whoever gets the headshot first, and that also is going to be determined entirely by your aiming abilities, which is going to be determined entirely by experience, because aiming is one of those things that only gets better with practice, and practice takes time. So the longer someone's been playing, the harder it will be exponentially for a newer player to defeat them in combat. And I think most people would agree that that's how it ought to be, but the problem for 343 is that means a new player starting out on the game for the first time, in theory, is going to be at a severe disadvantage in every single gunfight they get into, because every player they fight will have been playing longer than they have and have better aim. I remember when I first started playing Halo 3, I got my ass beat a lot. But 343 doesn't want new players getting the shit kicked out of them, because then they aren't going to enjoy the game, and 343 desperately wants new players to love the game so they'll get hooked. People want to feel like badass demigods on video games. That's what gets people hooked, and that's why COD has been so successful, because someone playing their first match ever can still drop a dozen kills and feel like a fucking pimp. So if 343 is fighting for a new audience, a new generation of gamers who are by definition noobs on Halo, but it's the noobs they care about, how do they make a noob feel like a badass? Well, folks, the answer is aim assist and bullet magnetism, and this is sneaky as fuck because most people won't notice the enhanced aim assist and don't even know what bullet magnetism is or that it's even in Halo, but it is, and it's significant. The aim assist is obviously nothing new, but it's worth mentioning that it gives way more assistance in Halo 4 than any Halo before and perhaps any game ever. But the bullet magnetism is taking bullshit to the next level. It is what it sounds like. Your bullets are magnetized and they curve towards the enemy. The farther away you are from the enemy, the longer your bullet will have to arc towards them, which means the farther away they are, the better your aim will be, and of course the less noticeable the magnetism is, which is the main reason that the lines of sight in Halo 4 are so long. This effectively removes a majority of the skill involved in aiming, it gives everyone MLG abilities, and it is here to stay. Halo as we knew it is dead, hopefully Destiny can fill the void in my heart. Please remember to rate the video and help spread the word so that people know what they are getting themselves into with Halo 5. This is Batman, signing out.